Hi, I'm Molly Post, and along with Kaden Busher and Nathan Kaiser, we created a project over the Amish subgroups. So, there are different reasons on why the Amish have subgroups and have split apart from one another in their communities. There are some cultural and religious reasons on why the Amish are so diverse. As well, there are diverse affiliations, divisions, sects, and movements that made the Amish community much broader. Over the last century, the Amish community has become more diverse than ever. A scholar once wrote, at the opening of the 12th century, there were 42 geographical distinct Amish settlements in North America, representing 3 or 4 affiliations, groups defined by shared views and practices. By the year 2012, the number of settlements have swelled to 493, and the number of affiliations had multiplied to more than 40. If the smaller subgroups within some affiliations are counted, the number of identifiable cohorts rises above 65, not including the more than 130 fairly independent congregations that lack a firm relationship to the wider affiliation. Although a multitude of Amish identities have cropped over the 12th century, members of the 2000 church districts still broadly recognize one another as Amish. One of the subgroups of Amish is the Old Order Amish. Old Order Amish are the main group of Amish who have resisted technology the most. In the late 1800s, a series of conferences distinguished conservation Amish and more liberal Amish who separated. The Old Order Amish have many subgroups, and there is roughly 250,000 in America. Characteristics all Old Order Amish have are no electricity or TV, no telephones unless it's for their business. They cannot own vehicles. Farming is usually done with horses. They dress in plain and solid colors. Women and girls are not allowed to cut their hair. They are not allowed to wear any jewelry as well. Church services are held at the Amish homes. No instruments are allowed in their homes or during church services. And ministry is not paid and selected by a lot. The technology that is used by the Old Order Amish affiliations. These are estimates of roughly what percentage of Old Order Amish allow certain types of technology. 97% allow motorized washing machines. 70% allow pneumatic tools, running water for bathtub, and inside flush toilets. 50% allow pickup balers. 35% allow mechanical milkers. 25% allow power lawnmowers, and 6% allow tractor for fieldwork. Another subgroup within the Amish community is the Schwarzentuber Amish. This is one of the subgroups of the Old Order Amish. The division into the Schwarzentuber Amish happened from 1913 to 1917. The Schwarzentuber Amish are considered to be one of the most traditional Amish subgroups, and they have some of the strictest restrictions in regard to technology. They do not also allow automobile traveling. They have reflectors on their buggies and do not allow the orange slow-moving triangle on the back because it is considered too modernized. Their clothing often tends to be very plain and heavy, especially for the women. The education is more basic than typical Amish schooling. Another subgroup of the Old Order Amish is the Bashinanan Amish. The Bashinanan Amish were found when some Amish families moved out to Johnson County, Iowa in 1914. These families moved out to Iowa because they wanted to be more conservative than the old affiliation, and were later joined by Amish from all over. They are currently the fourth largest Amish affiliation. They also have the most settlements out of any affiliation, while also being present in 19 states, which is the most. They do not allow running water in homes, flush toilets, bathtubs, pneumatic tools, chainsaws, bicycles, and scooters. They do not allow pressurized lamps and motorized washing machines as well. The Toby Amish is also another subgroup of the Old Order Amish. This subgroup started in 1940 by Tobias Hochstetler. He was accused of being dishonest with the business, so therefore he made another subgroup. The Toby Amish did not have a lot of followers, so when it came to marrying another person, it was hard to find a partner to marry. The leaders of the Toby Amish community approached the Old Order Amish to find partners so then they can get married. The Toby Amish remain in Wayne County. They also allowed more technological innovations than the traditional Old Order Amish. In 1967, the group split again into Old Order Toby and New Order Toby. The New Order Toby are allowed to use tractors for farming, electricity, and telephones, while the Old Order Toby are not allowed to use them. The clothing for this subgroup: the men have to wear the 2-button-down shirts, and then they are homemade from the women, and they dress just like the Old Order. The women wear a different headpiece than the traditional Old Order Amish, and they wear suit dresses colors than Old Order. Another subgroup of the Old Order Amish is the Andy Weaver Amish. This started in Holmes County in 1952. They split because of a shunning issue within the community. The Holmes County split in half because of this split. Right now, there are around 30 church districts within the Andy Weaver Amish community. This is somewhere between the Old Amish and the Swartzen-Trooper Amish. The Andy Weaver Amish community is strict on technology approaches. They limit the farm, business, and home technology within their community. They are stricter on youth regulations, which do not allow children to be in vehicles. They are also strict with shunning. This is the reason why they split between just regular Old Order Amish. They wanted the shunning to be more strict, so whenever someone gets shunned, you don't talk to them at all. The Swiss Amish is another subgroup of the Old Order Amish. The Swiss Amish is an ethnic subgroup. It began arriving in the United States in the Midwest in the 1830s. They settled in Allen and Adams County, Indiana in the early 1850s. Swiss Amish were often isolated in the Amish communities. They often isolated because they had little in common with the Pennsylvania German ethnicity and the other Amish groups around their area. Unlike the other Amish communities and subgroups, Swiss Amish have all open buggies. They do not allow closed-top buggies, although they do allow them to use umbrellas or blankets for protection against the weather. Technology is also very restricted and not used in the Swiss Amish community. The language of the Swiss Amish community is different than the other Amish communities. The Swiss Amish do not use the Pennsylvania German dialect like the Pennsylvania German ethnicity uses. The Swiss dialect is originated in the European homelands of the Swiss Amish immigrants. Some Swiss Amish tend to pick up on the Pennsylvania Dutch language, whereas the Pennsylvania Dutch or Pennsylvania German do not pick up on the Swiss Amish dialect. Another way to identify the Swiss Amish is that they yodel. The Pennsylvania German heritage does not normally yodel. Now, a different subgroup other than the Old Order Amish is the New Order Amish. So these will have different subgroups as well within them. The New Order Amish split from the Old Order in the 1960s over an issue on youth standards, tobacco, alcohol, and evangelical work. They were started in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and Holmes County, Ohio. There's 4 subgroups of the New Order Amish, but the big two are the non-electric New Order and the electric New Order. The New Order Amish are very similar to Old Order Amish. Their clothing, education, and rules on vehicles and /buggies are about the same as Old Order Amish. They do have some very distinct differences in beliefs and rules that are more technological is usually allowed, especially for businesses purposes. Tobacco and alcohol is permitted or prohibited in the New Order Amish. Church services are still at homes but include Sunday school. They are less strict on shunning practices. Churches have missions projects, and the courting practices are cleaner and more emphasis is placed on purity during a relationship within the New Order community. Another subgroup is conservative Mennonites. Conservative Mennonites mainly come from an Amish background and formed as a middle group between the Old Order Amish and the Amish Mennonites. They were called Conservative Amish Mennonites until 1950, when they dropped Amish from the name. Between the 1950s and the 1990s, many Mennonites withdrew to join the Conservative Mennonites. Some of the rules and beliefs of the Conservative Mennonites are that electricity is permitted, telephones are allowed but restrictions on smartphones, they are not allowed to have TV or radios, the only instrument that is allowed is the piano, only certain vehicles are allowed for the families to have, modern farming equipment is used, some groups allow filtered internet, church meetings are held in simple buildings, use excommunication instead of shunning. The difference is that they can still be among the church members and attend the services. They also have Sunday school. Missionary work is encouraged. School is through church members until the 8th grade or 10th grade, depending on which group. And they also wear plain clothing. Some allow simple and patterns on their patterns and colors. Another group is the moderate conservative Mennonites. The moderate conservative Mennonites allow everything that the conservative Mennonites do, but they also allow the following. They have no to little restrictions on vehicles. The TV and radio are allowed. Internet and movies are typically allowed as long as it is clean. Most instruments are allowed. Bolder clothing is allowed for women, but they still try to be modest. Men have loose restrictions for daily clothing. Women can trim their hair, but still have to keep it long. Church buildings are simple, but have more comfort. Excommunication is less common, and it's easier to rejoin the church. Another group is the Beachy Amish Mennonites. Some of the Beachy Amish are more conservative, while others are more modernized. They have electricity in their homes and are allowed to use vehicles. They also allow smartphones and some allow movies. The Beachy Amish also have a missionary mindset. Some of the clothing is the solid fabrics and they allow embellishments, especially for children. There is less restrictions on the men clothing, and some of the women use head coverings while others do not. In the education, the more of the Beachy Amish will receive a higher education than traditional Amish communities. Another group is the Theological Mennonites. The Theological Mennonites are a lot like the conservative Mennonites. They have strong work ethics. They believe in adult baptism and passionism. They also allow for church services only men to be their pastors. Women normally only wear head coverings during church services and not every day. The Theological Mennonites practice 7 ordinances. They practice marriage, baptism, communion, foot washing, a holy kiss when greeting fellow members, women wearing the head covering, which only some of them do, and anointing with oil. Those are some of the subgroups that we have decided to look up and go through. Here are the class questions that were asked. Are all the different subgroups basically the same? And do they like each other or do they not like certain groups because of how they do things? All the subgroups have similar core beliefs that they should separate themselves from the outside world and practice their faith in a tight community/family. Where they differ mainly is on what technology to restrict, clothing, and smaller issues decided by the Ordung, like rules on alcohol and tobacco, or where to have mass. Why are there different subgroups of the Amish, and why aren't they all just the same? There are different Amish subgroups because people have different beliefs on what the church should and should not allow. They are not all the same for the same reason as why almost every religion has different subgroups. Over time, some people will disagree with their church on certain issues and start a new church. Would a German Baptist be considered a subgroup to the Amish? Although German Baptists share many similarities to the Amish, they are not a subgroup to the Amish. German Baptists often are more evangelical and tend to be more lenient on technology. Like the Amish and German Baptists have different subgroups with different rules. More class questions. What defines one subgroup from another? In our book, an affiliation or /subgroup is defined as a cluster of 2 or more districts with at least 20 years of shared history. The book goes on to say affiliated congregations share similar ordungs, which specify distinctive lifestyles and visible symbols that set themselves apart from other affiliations. Do Amish subgroups ever come together or do they make sure to keep apart? Neither really. Amish groups don't band or seek out other Amish groups. They treat other Amish groups similarly to how they treat outsiders. Amish usually keep amongst those in their own districts, so this keeps them from interacting with outsiders and other Amish groups. Amish groups still see other Amish groups as Amish, similar to how Catholic would see a Lutheran as a Christian. Why are there subgroups and what is a choice or did something happen? In the earlier questions, we described why there are subgroups, and yes, it is a person's choice or to start a new Amish affiliation based on what they believe in. What are all the different types of Amish subgroups and the same amount of types of rules? Our book says there is about 40 Amish subgroups and 65 subgroups if you count smaller affiliations. Earlier we highlighted some of the larger subgroups. Every Amish subgroup had at least some small differences in their rules, and some can have vast differences, like the Schwarzentuber Amish compared to the modern Amish groups. Do all Amish subgroups abstain from using electricity? No. Some Amish allow electricity supplied from their own generators, and some of the most modern Amish even allow electricity from the public grid. Here is our works cited page.